Every year it seems to happen. The spirit of the Black church invades this service and we go a little long, so I beg you to bear with me. Another thing that happens every January is that I take the time to listen to the original recordings of the speeches of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Every year, some different speech seems to grab my attention and some new wisdom seems to be imparted to me. This year, it was the speech that King delivered in 1957 upon witnessing the formation of a new nation, Ghana, and the withdrawal of British colonial rule. And he said this: "Ghana has something to say to us. It says to us first that the oppressor never voluntarily gives freedom to the oppressed. You have to work for it." We have to work for freedom. In 2021, we know that. What we cannot unknow now is that we will be working for a different form of freedom, a different form of democracy. Perhaps a decade ago, we thought we could survive on a democracy built on a false foundation of inequality, and today we know we cannot. We must go back and do that blessed repair. King's words: "Freedom is never given to anybody, for the oppressor has you in domination because he plans to keep you there, and he never voluntarily gives it up." And that is where the strong resistance comes. Privileged classes never give up their privilege without strong resistance. Perhaps a year ago, we thought we could build our communities single-minded and isolated. Perhaps we thought we could separate out the strands of our diversity, unbraid and unweave them, and put each in its own chat room, give them their own news channels, let them only talk and plan together. This King holiday, we know we cannot. King's words about the formal ceremony of the changing of the guard in his own city at the time of Montgomery. "So don't go out this morning with any illusions. Don't go back into your homes and around Montgomery thinking that the Montgomery City Commission will eventually work things out, that it's going to rain and roll in on the wheels of inevitability. For if we wait for it to work itself out, it will never be worked out. The bus protest," he said, "is only the beginning. Buses are integrated in Montgomery, but this is just the beginning." This is just the beginning. What will happen on Wednesday is just the beginning. Perhaps a month ago, some of us could believe that a changing of the guard would restore some semblance of peace and order. This morning, we know that without our continued vigilance, it will not. In the same speech, King spoke about how the crowds of Black people in the fledgling new nation of Africa were chanting freedom, freedom, wanting to use the word they had learned in English from the democratic protests here in the United States of America. This week's news has been full of freedom fighters around the world saying that the United States can no longer be that standard. And it doesn't have to be this way. As Linda, Evan, and Rodney have so powerfully portrayed, we must move forward into a new kind of commitment. Yes, we pray with all our hearts that the days that are to come right before us will be less chaotic, less hate-filled, and less traumatizing on a day-to-day basis. And we also pray that we will not unlearn what we have now learned, that we will not forget that freedom, so hard won, can slip away in just half the time and be gone before you know it. That, as King says, after you cross the Red Sea, you journey in wilderness, and ongoing struggle and resistance is needed. We are, my friends, in that wilderness now. A tangle of all the things we have not wanted to weed out. Economic inequality that means our neighbors that we pass every time we travel just a little bit outside of our house don't have a place to sleep. Racial bias that still has a finger on too many scales. An economy that does not provide the basics of shelter, food, and health care for too many. Corporations and wealthy individuals who don't want to change their personal practice and profit margins to help save our planet. It's a big, brambly tangle. And in it is also the need to be right, the tendency to mock those different from us, and a kind of hatred that has gone septic under a president who ruled through mockery and deceit and decree. Deep within the tangle is the rusty barbed wire of an inner Calvinism that I think many of us still hold, that says that some are more deserving than others because of what they are or what they do. And some of us carry shame inside of ourselves that we are somehow inferior. If we look at this, we must let go of the myth that we just need to find the one right answer and put this all behind us, because what we actually need to do is the slow and steady work of untangling all this mess. So when we find ourselves watching endless news analysis, perhaps instead we can go read what the Poor People's Campaign wants us to do, or participate on virtual public witness on Monday instead of just making this hard-won day a day of TV binging and online shopping. After the election in 2008, we thought we had reached our goal, and many of us said, this is when the work begins. Many of us didn't know that. After the 2016 election, many spoke of the need to listen to poor white people. Very few of us talked about the need to control the power of the super rich who were orchestrating them. Some of us talked about the rise of hate, and people said this can never happen in our nation. We talked about growing extremism within law enforcement and were discounted. We protested about Trayvon Martin, and then we went home. We railed against the 1%, and then we went home. We saw the streets of our towns teem with pink-eared hats atop marching women, and then we went home. We took to the streets when George Floyd was killed, and then when skilled supremacist rhetoric was slipped into our newsfeed saying that blacks would lose us the election, many of us quietly took down our Black Lives Matter signs. It doesn't have to be this way. This time, let's study now what we can't unlearn. And let's put our house, this house, in order too, this house of our congregation. Because it's going to take time, and on this journey through the wilderness, people are going to need sanctuary. Those are the discussions we will be starting on Thursday night. One about the larger trends that we face, and one about the specific steps we can take here in Unitarian Universalism. In big ways and small, let us be committed that we will never again be a nation that locks children in cages, imprisons disproportionately people of one race, allows countless people to die in a pandemic because we mock health precautions. We need to listen, and we need to act, and we need to govern without falsehood, violence, hatred, or malice. Systemic change in our nation is what is needed, what has been needed, and what will be needed. And if we are tired, let us remember those black people, many poor, who took these risks in their small cities, where everyone knew where they lived and where they worked. Here are King's words to them in 1957. Don't sit down and do nothing now because the buses are integrated, because if you stop now, we will be in the dungeons of segregation and discrimination for another 100 years. And our children and our children's children will suffer all the bondage that we have lived under for years. It brought tears to my eyes to hear that this month. On this Martin Luther King Day, let us make the long-term commitment to the ongoing work of our wilderness, the tangle that we need to untangle, of economic issues and environmental ones, racism and classism, and also the rule of those whom we have allowed to have way too much power. Let us not decide from the comfort of suburban homes the one answer that will solve it all and let us put this all behind us. Don't let us listen to the leaders who know so they don't have to make us hear them. And in this way, we can circle round for freedom, water the rose of justice so it will open, live ourselves into the promise of the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "There is a great day ahead. The future is on its side. It's going through the wilderness, but the promised land is ahead."